In global politics, some moments redefine the rules. France's decision to challenge the United States was one of those moments. It wasn't just a minor disagreement, it was a public, firm stand that sent shockwaves across the Atlantic. For decades, the US led the Western world, with Europe as a close ally. Disagreements happened, but usually behind closed doors. This time, France acted alone and in the open, signaling it was no longer waiting for Washington's approval. The move surprised leaders in the EU and the White House, exposing cracks in the old alliance. Within the EU, some countries worried about angering the US, while others quietly cheered France's assertiveness. France's action disrupted the EU's usual process of finding a common position before dealing with outside powers. The event raised a critical question: could Europe truly act as one, or would national interests always come first? This was more than a political spat. It was about power, pride, and the future of the West. Relationships that seemed solid for generations suddenly looked fragile. The world watched as a historic alliance was tested in public. France forced everyone to reconsider what it means to be an ally in the 21st century. Who leads and who follows when the old order is upended? France's bold move made sure everyone was paying attention. The effects of that decision are still being felt today. The rules of international relations are changing, perhaps for good. France's stand was a signal: the era of automatic US leadership is over. France's bold move was the creation of a digital services tax, aimed squarely at tech giants like Google, Amazon, and Facebook, almost all American. The French government argued these companies made billions from French users, but paid little tax, exploiting loopholes to shift profits to low-tax countries. Local French businesses paid their share, but digital giants contributed almost nothing. President Macron's government said enough was enough. The new law imposed a 3% tax on revenue generated in France by large tech firms. This was a direct challenge to years of business as usual. France knew it was controversial, but global talks on digital taxation were stalled. France needed revenue and wanted to assert its right to tax economic activity within its borders. The move was about more than money. It was about power and sovereignty. American tech companies were dominating Europe's digital space, shaping culture and commerce. By taxing them, France was trying to regain control and set local rules. The digital tax was a tool for a bigger goal, ensuring the digital future wasn't dictated by a handful of global corporations. France's message was clear: global giants must play by local rules. The world was watching to see if others would follow. France's action was a test of national sovereignty in the digital age. It was also a statement about fairness in a rapidly changing economy. The digital tax was just the beginning of a much larger debate. France was ready to lead that conversation. The EU's response to France's digital tax was anything but unified. Some countries, like Spain and Italy, supported France, seeing it as a necessary first step. The European Commission had tried to propose a similar tax for the whole bloc, but consensus was elusive. Ireland, with its low tax model, strongly opposed the idea, fearing it would drive away multinationals. Sweden and Denmark worried about provoking a trade war with the US. The EU was left divided, unable to act as a single bloc. This internal split weakened Europe's position on the world stage. The US saw France's move as a solo act, not a European policy. The episode exposed the tension between national interests and collective action in the EU. Macron hoped to inspire unity, but the immediate result was more fragmentation. The limits of French influence and European solidarity were clear. When faced with US retaliation, most EU countries stayed on the sidelines. The White House's reaction was swift and furious. President Trump saw France's digital tax as an attack on American companies and on America itself. He called the tax discriminatory and threatened strong retaliation. Trump's America First worldview saw this as an ally taking advantage of the US. The administration quickly threatened tariffs on iconic French goods, wine, cheese, luxury handbags. The message was blunt: tax our companies, and we'll tax your exports. Trump's style was confrontational, turning a tax debate into a trade dispute. For him, this was about more than Google or Amazon. It was about American power. The move by France contradicted his narrative of US dominance. It showed that allies were willing to push back and assert their own interests. Trump felt personally betrayed by Macron, whom he once considered a friend. The dispute became a public test of wills between two very different leaders. The US was determined not to let France set a precedent. The world watched as the transatlantic relationship reached a new low. The stakes were suddenly much higher than just tax policy. The digital tax fight became a showdown between Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump, two leaders with opposite styles. Macron, the young European integrationist, believed in diplomacy and a strong, united Europe. Trump, the populist nationalist, trusted his instincts and put America first. Their personal relationship started with hope. Macron invited Trump to Paris, and they shared symbolic gestures of friendship. But deep disagreements over Iran, climate, and now digital taxes drove them apart. Macron saw the tax as defending European interests. Trump saw it as betrayal. The conflict became a public battle of visions, a sovereign Europe versus a dominant America. Macron tried to use charm and strategy. Trump responded with blunt force. The friendship soured, making the political clash even more bitter. The dispute wasn't just about policy, it was about leadership in the West. Macron wanted Europe to stand tall. Trump wanted America to call the shots. Their clash symbolized a broader shift in global power. The world saw two leaders unwilling to back down. The outcome would shape the future of transatlantic relations. The digital tax was the spark, but the real fight was over who would lead. The era of easy cooperation was over. France's tax and Trump's response brought the threat of a trade war. The US threatened 100% tariffs on French goods, champagne, cheese, luxury items, doubling prices and threatening French exports. French producers, from wineries to fashion houses, feared losing access to the huge US market. American businesses importing French goods faced higher costs or lost sales. Trade wars hurt both sides. Consumers pay more, businesses suffer, and uncertainty spreads. The tariffs were a negotiating tactic, meant to force France back to the table. Both sides faced pressure to de-escalate before real damage was done. The world watched to see who would blink first. Would France back down, or would the US follow through? The economic fallout was real, and the stakes were high. The standoff showed how quickly economic disputes can spiral into global crises. France's move was part of Europe's search for a new role in the world. For decades, Europe relied on US leadership for security and prosperity. But Trump's America First policies made Europeans question that reliance. The idea of strategic autonomy gained traction. Europe needed to act independently. Macron championed this vision. Europe should build its own military, set its own policies, and defend its economic interests. The digital tax was a test of this philosophy. France was asserting economic sovereignty and challenging the old order. The EU remains divided, but the trend is clear. Some want less dependence on the US. The digital tax was a signpost on this new path. Europe's journey to independence is slow and difficult, but France's actions showed a growing desire to be an equal partner, not a junior one. The world is watching to see if others will follow. The balance of power in the West is shifting. The digital tax dispute raised big questions for Western alliances like NATO and the G7. These institutions were built on shared values and trust. But when France and the US fight a trade war, that unity is shaken. NATO's collective defense depends on solidarity. Economic disputes erode that trust. Trump's criticism of European defense spending and the digital tax fight added tension. The G7, meant for economic cooperation, became a stage for open disagreement. The French tax made it harder to find common ground. Alliances now look more like temporary arrangements than unbreakable bonds. National interests are taking priority over unity. The future of these institutions depends on managing internal conflicts. The era of automatic US-led unity is fading. France's digital tax is a sign of a world in flux. The US-Europe relationship is being redefined, and old certainties are fading. Watch for whether Europe can unite around strategic autonomy or remains divided. The future of Europe's global role hangs in the balance. The US must decide if it will rebuild alliances or keep going it alone. The strength of NATO and the G7 depends on how these questions are answered. The global debate over digital rules is just beginning. Will countries create a global standard, or will the internet splinter into national fiefdoms? France's move was just the opening shot. The conversation and the contest for global leadership is far from over.